I've been so excited for today's video, really excited. It's been in the planning for a little while. Can't believe I can finally bring it to you. It was so good to be making it, and I'm so pleased to be able to share it with you. Today we're going to make a wall hanging, so let's get into it. Welcome back if we're just meeting. My name's Claire. So I've been watching loads and loads of videos to do with tapestry wall hangings, and I first saw this on a video by Tina Lee and it really piqued my interest. I thought that looks like a lot of fun and I want to give it a go. I've watched Lone Fox, he has a video or a few on it. So does With Wendy. I also found a channel called Spruce and Linen that dedicate their whole channel to making wall hangings, and I've been binge watching them basically. Absolutely love their content. All those links will be down below because they have inspired me in my own wall hanging, but make sure you watch this video first and then head over there. So I obviously have a plan for my videos, and so I had to wait a while to be able to do this. But the last few days, probably the last 3 days, I've been working on it. It takes longer because I am filming the process for you, but I am absolutely in love with my final project. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek and then we get into it. Ta-da! That's all you're getting until a little bit later, so do be patient. But I'm going to take you through the process of making it. It's not a tutorial because this is my first time making one of these, but I just wanted to take you through the process. You might see if it's something you want to have a go at. If you stay to the end, I'll talk a bit about what I loved about this project, things that I could improve on or change for next time, and then I will show you some details on my final project. So first off, I bought this frame. Now this frame was £10. Now I don't recommend this frame, and I'll tell you why, because the quality is really poor, but we'll get into that. This is a whole kit. It's a weaving loom and accessories kit. So it comes with the frame, it comes with a shed stick, a weaving comb, comes with a large shuttle, a needle, and some warp thread. I searched the internet high and low to try and find a loom that was affordable. I didn't want to spend too much money because I didn't know if I was actually going to love this or not. Although I will be purchasing another loom. So I searched and I searched and I searched and I struggled to find anything under £30 or £40. In the end, I did come across this one and it was only £10, and that's why I picked it up. I know there's one at IKEA which you can get for about £5, I think, but that wasn't available to me, so I wasn't able to purchase that one. As you can see in the footage, when I opened it up, as soon as I saw it, I thought this is going to break by the end of the first use. I just know it is. Check out what I said. First impressions, you get what you pay for, you really do. You get a wooden frame, but it looks like it would fall apart at a moment's notice. And as you'll see as we get on, there were some issues with the build. I've got a wall hanging out of it, so, you know, kind of what more can I ask for, really? So knowing that I was going to be doing this, I've been building up a little bit of a yarn stash to use specifically for wall hangings. I bought a few different colourways, so I got some autumnal colours, which is the colours that I use today. I've also got some pink and greys, which I will make another wall hanging with to go with my decor. So the main thing I wanted to do when I was purchasing the yarn was to get lots of textures and lots of colours. So that's what I did do. I've got a couple that are just normal mid-weight yarns that you might use to knit a cardigan, and I use those for the header and the footer. And I've got some other ones with more of a felty consistency. I bought some wool roving. Wool roving is just wool that is unspun. I didn't have a wide range of yarns, but I had enough to make a really nice textured boho inspired piece. So upon opening the loom, the first thing I really had to do was warp the loom, and warping the loom just means putting vertical threads up and down. I know quite a few of you have come over from my first channel, Penguin and Pear, where I talk about garment sewing, so most of you will understand what the warp and the weft is. So the warp is the vertical thread that runs through any kind of woven fabric, and the weft is the fabric that goes that way, horizontal. And those two things have always confused me in dressmaking, so I'm finally on board with which is the warp and which is the weft. At this point, this is when you decide how big you want your piece to be. If you wanted quite a slim piece, you would do less warp threads. If you wanted a thicker piece like I chose, then you will do the full width, which essentially is what I did do. Now, I used the warp thread that came with the pack. It came and it was knotted when it came, and that was my first mistake. I should have actually unknotted it before warping it, but I started warping and unthreading it as I was doing it, and it wasn't working. The thread was really bad quality. I ended up warping up most of it. I ran my fingers across it to make sure the tension was even across all the stitches. When I did that, it just all fell apart, and I just thought, this isn't going to work. So I had some lace weight crochet yarn that I've had for years and years. I've never used it, and so I thought that would do. It is a bright green, so it wasn't perfect colouring, but it's what I had, and I didn't want to go and purchase any more. So I warped with that, and that worked 1,000 times better. Honestly, it really, really did. The main thing with a warp thread is you want it to have no stretch at all. It cannot stretch. So you can use anything really. You could use yarn or string, but just make sure it doesn't stretch. Some yarns, when you pull on them, they do stretch out, but you want something that's not going to stretch. Da-da, we are done. So that's what I did. I'd warped up and I was ready to start working. So first things first, I got a little bit of cardboard and inserted that at the bottom because I had watched on all these videos telling me that that will give you a little bit of space for tying your ends afterwards. So that is what I did do. And then I had to create the footer, which just was a basic weaving stitch, just going in and out of each of the warp threads right across the way. I had this needle that came with the kit, and that was a big help. I think it would have been a lot more fiddly for me if I hadn't had that needle, to be honest. But if you don't have one of those, you could use a big embroidery needle. You could sellotape your yarn to a piece of card and thread it through. You could do all sorts of things really. I just used an average 2-ply weight yarn to do that, and I just weave through for about 10 to 12 rows. Now I did measure my yarn out before and cut it off of the ball, because you can't put the ball through each of the warp threads. So next thing, I wanted to add a fringe because I really wanted this to be boho inspired, as I mentioned. I took a mustard coloured yarn, I took a dark grey and a thinner piece from my actual footer yarn. So I wrapped the yarn around the loom, around the side of the loom 15 times. Turned out I needed about 18 wraps of it. Once I'd wrapped it around the required amount, I just cut it off on one side, and then I had some nice long length. And then I did something called a ruler loop, I think that's what they're called. I'll put it on screen if it's not called that. I get confused with these new names that I am learning. I just took the 3 different yarns together, looped them through as you're seeing on screen now, and did that right across. Now there's lots of ways that you can design your piece, and you could do little blocks here and there, and you could do hills and shapes, you could do circles, you could do triangles, you could do anything really. But for my first piece, I decided I just wanted it to be horizontal all the way. So I just did the fringe right the way across, and then I did something called an Egyptian knot, and I did look up these terms as I was going because I wanted to try lots of different stitches that I knew would be beneficial to my learning process really. So I did 2 rows of those Egyptian knots, one in mustard and one in grey. Then I did a couple more rows of just a plain weave, and then I wanted to get straight in and use my roving yarn to create a sumac stitch. I've seen everyone doing the sumac stitch, and I love that it comes out from the piece. It gives it more of a 3D look. It's got lots of texture to it if you use roving. It's just, I just love the look, basically. When I first watched videos about the sumac stitch, I thought it was a really difficult stitch, but it turns out it is not difficult at all. You're just looping it around a couple of the threads. So after that, I just went back to a plain weave in a darker, thicker yarn. Then I decided to do something called pick and pick. I believe that's what it's called, where it's just a normal weave, but it's 2 different colours. And then you squish it down and it makes almost like a diamond shape, although mine's not that squished anymore. Then I used some more roving in a different colour, more of a brown. I was debating whether I wanted to include any browns. Initially I wanted it more of a neutral and brown colour, but I ended up using the mustard instead. So I've only got that one brown, but it's almost like a grey, so it fits in quite well. For that one, I just did a normal weave, but once I'd done it, I pulled the roving through the front so it looked more 3D. Then a couple more rows, because when you do normal weaving rows, that helps secure stitches that are not that secure, such as when I'd pulled the roving through. So that stitch wasn't that secure. And then I was trying to do these loops where you loop the actual yarn around something. So I just used a paintbrush and I did it, but the more I did it, it didn't seem very secure. So I abandoned that in the end and went with just wrapping the yarn around a couple of loops. Bit like the Egyptian loops, but I think it was a bit different to that. Then I did a couple of rows of mustard, a couple of rows of grey to tie all the colours in together. And then I did my header, which was done with the same yarn as the footer. And the header and the footer just keep the thing in place and stop it from all falling apart, basically. That's my understanding anyway. But bear in mind, this is my first time using this, so... Just before I got to this point, my frame did actually fall apart. One end of it completely broke off. I fixed it together with painter's tape so that I could finish this thing. But as I predicted right at the start, this wasn't going to last more than one go. Maybe I was unlucky, I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit heavy-handed with it, perhaps. So I had to cut the warp threads and tie them off, both on the bottom and the top. And afterwards I thought, how am I going to hang this thing up? And I was a bit worried about how I could do it, because the warp threads at the top, where they're knotted at the top, you can see that and they're bright green. But actually I think it's part of the thing. It's part of its character of making my very first one. So I just thread a couple of stitches on each end and hung it up on this branch that I found outside. So I don't know about you, but I absolutely love my wall hanging. Leave a comment down below and let me know how you think it came out. I'm going to put this up because it's going to ache my arm otherwise. But I'm just showing off one last time. As I mentioned, I watched a lot of videos and that really helped, because I got my technique down as much as I could in the first instance. Before even having a go, I knew certain things about, like having an arch on the loom and then push it down, and that will release tension across the piece so that the sides don't come in. And also I was like pulling at the sides to make sure the sides stayed even. I think for the most part I did a pretty good job with that, don't you? So I've noted down a few things to be careful of, or things to be mindful of, or things that I want to change in my next one. The first one is to have the warp thread you want in the colour that you want on your person, because I didn't even think about the warp thread ahead of time. I don't know why. If you buy a kit, do not rely on the warp thread. Here is the mess that is mine. That's what I've got left over. Didn't end up using. As you saw in the footage, I pulled it all off. No, we don't want that, do we? We want some warp thread that's actually going to work. Ultimately, it didn't really matter that I used green thread, but I think moving forward, I will want to get some white thread. Another thing is that when you're brushing your fringe out, if you choose to brush the fringe out, I was in two minds about whether I was going to brush the fringe out because I quite like the look of it wound around itself, but I thought it would be prettier, more boho if I released those plies from each other. In the process, I nearly pulled it out of itself just over here, and I had to get a crochet hook to pull them back up, and then I was more careful on this side and it worked out better. The only other thing I want to do that I didn't do in this wall hanging was to play with design a little bit more. This time I really played with the texture and the colours. The next one I do, I want to try some heels, some circles, maybe some triangles. You could even do a scene if you really wanted to. You just need to draw it out on a piece of paper so you know what you're doing. But that is something that I definitely want to look into more in the future. Also, just note that when you are trimming your fringe, if you decide to trim your fringe, then you will have to trim it a number of times. I would trim it, brush it out a bit more. You'll get more bits hanging down, cut it again, and that will be great. I'm going to purchase a second loom. This time I'm going to purchase one that is good quality because I now know this is a project that I want to continue with. The good thing about it is because I've got chronic health issues and I spend quite a few days in bed, I feel like this is something I could do in bed if I've still got a little bit of energy. So let me know down below whether you have ever had a go at this. Did you like it? Is it your thing or not? Perhaps you haven't had a go and you're intrigued to have a go after this. If you don't have money to purchase a loom, then you can make your own. You just need a frame, so you could get a cheap canvas from the pound shop or the dollar shop and some nails into it, and you've got yourself a loom. So that is always an option. There's a couple of videos that I saw that do show you how to do that. I think Lone Fox did that. What colour palette would you use? I'd really love to know that. So do let me know down below. If you like this video and you'd like to see more like it, do hit that subscribe button. Give me a big old like for the algorithm. And if you got particular value out of this video, consider purchasing a coffee for me. All the details will be down below in the description box. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye for now.